I always thought I had a good head on my shoulders. Sure, I grew up privileged, my family owns a highly successful business, and money was never an issue, but I never wanted to be that kind of rich girl. My parents raised me with values, and I worked for my own money, even though I never really needed to. That's how I met Mark. I was 20, working as a waitress for the experience, not the paycheck. Mark came in one evening with a group of friends, and something about his quiet confidence caught my attention. He wasn't flashy, didn't try to impress anyone. Over time we got to know each other, and a few months later, we started dating. Mark wasn't poor, but he wasn't wealthy like my family. Upper middle class, comfortable but frugal. He always insisted on paying his own way, never took advantage of anything my family offered, and even turned down expensive vacations with us. When we got engaged last year, I thought I had hit the jackpot. A man who loved me for me and not my money. At first, my family had their doubts. My dad, a shrewd businessman, even hinted that Mark might be a gold digger. I defended him fiercely. He wasn't like that. He was independent, self-sufficient, and honest. When Mark graduated, my dad ended up hiring him, and he worked his way into a high-earning position. It felt like a victory. I had proven my family wrong, and they had come to accept and love Mark. And then, last Sunday happened. I was supposed to stay at my sister's place that evening because of work, but I ended up coming down with a fever. It hit me hard, body aches, chills, the works. I knew I wasn't going anywhere, so I let my sister know I was staying home. Instead of sleeping in the master bedroom, I crashed in the guest room. It had better ventilation, a mini fridge, and most importantly, a bathroom right next to the bed. The last thing I wanted was to stumble through the house in the middle of the night, sick and exhausted. I must have passed out at some point because I didn't even hear Mark come home. What did wake me up, though, were voices outside. Loud, laughing voices. Still half asleep, I frowned and pushed the heavy comforter off me. My body felt like lead, every muscle aching from the fever. I blinked at the glowing numbers on my phone. 11:42 p.m. Who the hell was Mark talking to at this hour? I pushed myself up and shuffled over to the window. My legs felt shaky and my head throbbed. I barely had the energy to stand, but curiosity got the best of me. Peeking through the curtains, I spotted Mark and a group of his friends gathered around the outdoor fire pit, drinks in hand. That wasn't unusual. Mark liked to host every now and then. What was unusual was the way they were laughing. Loud, obnoxious, and mean. I was about to call out and say hello when I heard my name. "Bro, you really hit the jackpot, huh?" One of his friends said, chuckling. I froze. Mark just smirked, swirling the drink in his hand. Then a girl's voice chimed in, playful but cutting. "Jesus, you're about to make some serious bank, Mark." My breath hitched. Mark chuckled. "Yeah, just 3 more years and I'm free." Laughter erupted around the fire. Someone slapped Mark on the back. "Man, that's the dream," another guy said. "Marry rich, chill for a few years and cash out." I felt the blood drain from my face. My fingers gripped the curtain so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Yeah, and she doesn't even want a prenup," someone else chimed in. "I mean, come on, Mark. Do you really love her or are you just putting in your time?" Mark laughed. "Let's just say, I'm playing it smart." My stomach twisted. I felt like I was going to throw up. More laughter. More jokes at my expense. They called me Trust Fund Barbie. They mocked my family, saying I was too naive, too sheltered to ever suspect anything. And Mark? He let them. No, he encouraged them. I wanted to burst out of the room, scream at them, demand answers, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, stuck in some twisted nightmare where my fiancé, the man I had loved and trusted for years, had just admitted, in his own words, that he was using me for money, for status, for an easy way out. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I just stood there shaking as they continued their little celebration of my stupidity. When they finally left, and Mark came inside, I stayed silent. I heard him move around, probably cleaning up before he headed to bed. My body refused to function. My mind was screaming at me to do something, but what? I had no proof, no recording, no way to make him admit what I had just heard. Finally, I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and texted my sister. "I need to stay with you tonight. Don't ask questions. Just let me crash." Then, like a ghost, I slipped out of the house in the middle of the night. I didn't even look back. When I got to my sister's apartment, I didn't tell her anything. I just curled up on the couch and let the darkness swallow me. I haven't gone home since. I've barely spoken to Mark, telling him only that I'm sick and don't want him to catch whatever I have. My sister is worried, but I feel too ashamed to explain. My parents were right. Mark is a gold digger, and I fell for it. The worst part? I have no proof. No recordings, no texts, nothing but my own word against his. And my dad can't just fire him for being a scumbag. As far as I know, he's good at his job, and there's no legal reason to get rid of him. I feel trapped, angry, betrayed, and I have no idea what to do next. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying Mark's words over and over in my head. Just 3 more years and I'm free. What did he mean, free? Free from me? From marriage? From the act he had been putting on? I lay on my sister's couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. The fever that had made my body ache earlier was nothing compared to the pain in my chest. I had spent years believing Mark was different, that he wasn't like the men my family had warned me about. And now, with a single sentence, he had shattered everything. By the time morning rolled around, my sister Leah was up, making coffee and watching me with cautious concern. "You look like crap." "Thanks." My voice was hoarse. I hadn't spoken much since I arrived at her place. Leah sat across from me, crossing her legs. "Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess?" I hesitated. I knew the moment I told her it would be real, not just something that lived in my head. Finally, I exhaled. "Mark's a gold digger." Leah blinked. "Wait, what?" So I told her. Everything. The overheard conversation. The way his friends had laughed, calling me Trust Fund Barbie. The disgusting way he had chuckled and agreed. Leah's expression shifted from shock to anger. "That asshole!" I swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do." "What do you mean? You leave him. You tell Dad, you burn his stuff, or, I don't know, ruin his life somehow." I shook my head. "I don't have proof." Leah scoffed. "You are the proof. You heard it with your own ears. But it's just my word against his. He'll deny it. He'll say I misunderstood, or that it was a joke, and his friends will back him up. My dad can't fire him based on my accusations alone. As far as anyone knows, he's a great employee." Leah drummed her fingers against the table. "So you're just going to let him get away with it?" I clenched my jaw. "No, I just need to be smart about this." I spent the next few hours avoiding Mark's texts. He only sent a few, mostly checking in to see if I was feeling better. If he suspected anything, he didn't show it, and that made my blood boil even more. By the afternoon, Leah and I were sitting on her couch, brainstorming. "You could call off the wedding and say you had doubts," she suggested, "and let him walk away clean? No way. He's been planning this for years. I'm not letting him take the easy way out." Leah smirked. "So we make sure he doesn't?" I thought for a long moment, my mind spinning through possibilities. Then an idea began to form, one that made my heart race. I turned to Leah, my voice steady. "I think I know what to do." That evening, I finally texted Mark back. Me. "Hey, feeling a little better. Sorry I disappeared, just needed some space." His reply came quickly. "Mark, babe, you scared me. Thought something was wrong." "Oh, something was definitely wrong." "I think I was just overwhelmed. This whole wedding thing has been a lot. Can we talk tomorrow?" Mark. "Of course. I love you." I stared at the words on the screen, my stomach twisting. How many times had he said those words without meaning them? The next morning, I went home. Mark greeted me at the door with open arms, but I sidestepped him, keeping my expression neutral. "Hey," I said, forcing a small smile. He frowned. "You okay?" I nodded, walking past him into the living room. I just needed some time to think. Mark sat beside me, taking my hand. "About what?" I looked down, as if hesitant. "I was wondering, do you think we should get a prenup?" Mark stiffened. I felt his grip on my hand tighten slightly, before he let out a breathy chuckle. "A prenup? Where's this coming from?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I just realized I've been kind of naive about money. You know, my dad brought it up before, and I always shut him down. But maybe he had a point." Mark's jaw twitched. "Babe, we don't need a prenup. We love each other. Marriage isn't about money. I tilted my head, studying him. So if we did sign one, it wouldn't change anything, right? He laughed, nervously. I just don't see the point. I smiled, pretending to let it go. You're right. Forget I said anything. But inside, I was seething. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. Over the next week, I played my role perfectly. I let Mark think things were fine, that I was still blindly in love with him. But behind the scenes, I was preparing for war. Leah helped me go through our accounts, making sure my personal finances were secure. I consulted a lawyer, not to draft a prenup, but to see exactly what would happen if I didn't get married. And most importantly, I started planning how to expose Mark for exactly who he was, because if he thought he was getting away with this, he had no idea who he was dealing with. For the first time in years, I looked at Mark not as my fiancé, but as an enemy. And if he wanted to play games, I was going to beat him at his own. The hardest part was pretending. Every time he kissed me, every time he smiled like he meant it, I had to swallow the rage bubbling inside me. I had spent so long believing in us, in him, and now I had to pretend I still did. But I wasn't just pretending. I was planning. Leah and I spent hours digging into everything. Bank accounts, assets, any possible way he could benefit from a divorce in 3 years. I wanted to know exactly what he stood to gain. Turns out it was a lot. Since we never signed a prenup, and I had significant assets from my trust fund, he would be entitled to a huge payout in the event of a divorce after a certain number of years. 3, to be exact. My family's business had protections in place, but my personal wealth, that was fair game. I had handed him his golden ticket, and he knew it. I needed a way to expose him, but I couldn't just tell my family. They'd demand proof, and Mark was too careful for that. I needed him to show his true colors, and I needed witnesses. That's when I got an idea. One thing about Mark, he loved bragging. He had been careful around my family, but with his friends, he let his guard down, and that was exactly what I needed. A few nights later, I casually mentioned that we should have a small engagement party, just something casual, with close friends. Mark seemed hesitant at first, but when I reassured him it would just be a laid-back gathering at home, he relaxed. Yeah, okay. That could be fun, he agreed. I smiled. Great. I'll let Leah handle the planning. He had no idea that Leah was setting the whole thing up as a trap. We picked a weekend, sent out invites, and made sure his friends were there. The ones who had laughed with him that night. The ones who had called me Trust Fund Barbie. The ones who would get comfortable after a few drinks. The ones who would make Mark show his true face. The night of the party, I played my part flawlessly. Greeted guests, smiled at Mark, acted like the perfect adoring fiancé. Leah played the role of the supportive sister. And my family? They were distant but polite. My dad in particular watched Mark like a hawk. As the drinks flowed, Mark and his friends drifted outside, just like before. I excused myself from the conversation I was having and made my way upstairs, to the perfectly placed recording setup Leah and I had hidden on the balcony. The moment I put my headphones on, my blood ran cold. It was happening. Again. Man, I still can't believe you pulled this off, one of his friends laughed. Mark chuckled. I told you, you just have to play the long game. My stomach twisted. So what's the plan? You just ride it out until the payout? Mark clinked his glass against someone else's. Pretty much. 3 years, then I'm done. She'll never see it coming, another voice chimed in. And she really didn't make you sign a prenup? Mark scoffed. Nah, she actually trusts me. Laughter. More toasts. More jokes about how stupid I was. I sat there listening, my hands clenched into fists. This was it. This was proof. I took a deep breath, steadying my heartbeat. It wasn't enough just to hear it. I needed my family to hear it too. I glanced at Leah, who sat beside me, watching me carefully. Ready? She whispered. I nodded. Let's end this. I made my way downstairs, heart pounding. I walked straight to my father, leaned in and whispered, I need you to hear something. His eyes darkened, but he nodded. Let's go. Leah, my mom, and my dad followed me to the study. I pulled out my phone, hit play, and let them listen. Silence filled the room. My father's expression was unreadable, but my mother... She looked sick. Leah just crossed her arms, satisfied. When the recording ended, my father exhaled sharply. That little... Yeah, I cut in. I know. He was silent for a long moment before nodding. All right, we're going to handle this. I swallowed. How? He met my gaze. Leave that to me. I returned to the party, acting like nothing had changed. Mark was still outside, laughing, drinking, thinking he had won. He had no idea what was coming, and I couldn't wait to watch him fall. I walked back into the party, feeling an eerie sense of calm. I had spent the past few days seething, planning, preparing. Now I didn't have to pretend anymore. I had everything I needed, and soon, Mark would have nothing. Leah gave me a subtle nod from across the room. My father had already left the study, his face unreadable as he mingled with guests. My mother still looked pale, but she was composed. We all knew what was coming. Mark, oblivious, was outside with his friends, still laughing, still celebrating his big win. I picked up a glass of champagne, took a slow sip, and walked straight toward him. Hey, babe. My voice was smooth, easy. Having fun? He turned to me, his face lighting up with that same charming smile he had used on me for years. Of course, it's a great party. I smiled. Good, because I have a surprise. Mark raised an eyebrow. Oh? I clinked my glass against his. A toast, to us. He smirked, lifting his drink. To us. I turned slightly, raising my voice so the guests inside and out could hear. And to Mark, the man who's so dedicated to this relationship, he's willing to count down the years until he's free. Silence. I watched the color drain from Mark's face as murmurs rippled through the crowd. His friends shifted awkwardly, clearly sensing danger. What? Mark laughed, but it was forced. What are you talking about? I tilted my head. Oh, don't play dumb. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Or should I remind you? I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen, and hit play. Mark's own voice filled the air. 3 years, and I'm free. The laughter of his friends. The mocking words. The smug confidence in his tone. People gasped. Some of our friends looked horrified. My parents stood by the patio doors, silent, watching. Mark's face went from red to pale in seconds. What the hell is this? I smiled sweetly. Oh, just a little recording from your conversation the other night. You know, the one where you and your buddies were laughing about how I was too stupid to make you sign a prenup? More gasps. Someone whispered, Oh my God. Mark tried to step forward, but I didn't move. This is insane, he hissed. You're twisting my words. I folded my arms. Am I? Because it really sounded like you were bragging about using me for my money. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. He knew he was cornered. Dude, one of his friends muttered, stepping away from him. What the hell? Mark turned to the crowd, desperation creeping into his voice. Come on, this is ridiculous. It was just talk, jokes. You guys know how we mess around? Oh, so you were lying? I cut in. Because that would be weird since you got real quiet when I brought up a prenup. Mark swallowed hard. I mean, if you're not a gold digger, I continued, then you'd have no problem signing one now, right? Silence. He stared at me, eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape. But there wasn't one. I turned to my father. Dad, since Mark's such a great guy, and this was all just a big misunderstanding, why don't you go ahead and draft up a prenup for us, just to put all this to rest? Mark clenched his jaw. My father, standing tall and unreadable, simply nodded. Absolutely. We can have it done by morning. All eyes were on Mark now, waiting, watching, his hands curled into fists. I could see the rage in his eyes, the panic, the moment he realized there was no way out of this without losing everything. I need some air, he mumbled, pushing past me. He stormed inside, shoving through guests. Leah smirked, sipping her wine. That went well. I exhaled, the weight in my chest finally lifting. Yeah, it really did. The party fizzled out not long after that. People made awkward goodbyes, clearly unsure of what to say. Mark never came back outside. Leah and I cleaned up in silence, the satisfaction settling in. Then, my father approached. Come with me. I followed him into his office, where he shut the door and turned to face me. This ends tonight, he said firmly. I crossed my arms. That's the plan. No. He shook his head. I mean completely. I hesitated. What do you mean? I had Mark investigated. My father's face was grim. Turns out, he didn't just see you as a meal ticket. He's been betting on this. I frowned. What? My father slid a folder across the desk. I opened it, my breath catching as I saw financial records, emails, documents showing that Mark had literally been gambling on our marriage. He took out loans, in his own name, my father continued, using the expectation of your future wealth as leverage. My blood ran cold. He was planning to divorce you exactly when his financial situation got desperate, my father said, and when you'd have no choice but to pay him out. I gripped the desk to steady myself. This wasn't just about greed. He had planned every step, every move, banking on my love and trust to fund his life. I inhaled sharply. What do we do? My father's lips pressed into a thin line. I've already started the legal process. By tomorrow, Mark will be fired. His accounts, every investment he made based on this, will be frozen. And if he tries to fight back, we'll bury him. In court. I stared at the documents, my pulse roaring in my ears. Mark wasn't just losing me. He was losing everything. And the best part? He had done it to himself. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face, his smug grin, his confidence, his entitlement. The man I had loved, trusted, and defended was nothing but a parasite, feeding off my life while counting down the days until he could cash out. But now he was the one running out of time. By the time the sun rose, I was already dressed, sitting in my father's study with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Leah sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, casually reading updates from our lawyer. Mark's accounts should be frozen within the hour, she said, sipping her own coffee. And Dad already put the termination through. He'll find out the moment he tries to log in at work. I nodded, gripping the mug tighter. Good, Leah glanced at me. You okay? I exhaled slowly. I will be. I had spent years convincing myself that Mark was my forever. But forever doesn't mock you behind your back. Forever doesn't plan their escape while pretending to love you. And forever sure as hell doesn't bet on your money like it's a stock option. No. Mark was not my forever. And today, he would find out exactly what that meant. At exactly 8:17 a.m., my phone started vibrating. Mark, I let it ring. A minute later, another call, then another. Leah raised an eyebrow. You gonna pick up? I let out a slow breath, then answered. Hello? What the hell is going on? Mark's voice exploded through the speaker. I pulled the phone away from my ear, unimpressed. Good morning to you too. Don't play games with me, my name. I just got locked out of my work email, my bank account is frozen, and my credit card got declined at the gas station. What the fuck did you do? I smirked. Oh, you mean the accounts you set up with my future money? Yeah, my family took care of those. Mark was breathing hard. You can't do this. I leaned back in my chair. I think you'll find that we can. A beat of silence. Then, look, babe. I laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, now I'm babe? Mark, you got caught. You played yourself. And now you're pissed because your little scheme blew up in your face. It wasn't a scheme, he snapped. You're twisting this into something it's not. I rolled my eyes. Oh, really? Because I'm pretty sure when you said, just 3 more years and I'm free, you weren't talking about vacation plans. Mark's breathing turned uneven. He was panicking now. Listen, we can work this out, he said, voice softer. I know it looks bad, but we can fix this. I love you. I let out a sharp laugh. No, you love what you thought you could. Get out of me. Silence. Then, cold as ice, I said, It's over, Mark. You're done. You can't just destroy me, he shouted. You don't have that kind of power. I smiled. Oh, but I do. And I already did. Then I hung up. Mark showed up at the house an hour later, pounding on the front door like a lunatic. I didn't answer. Neither did my father, who stood in his office with his arms crossed, watching the security footage on his monitor. He'll leave soon enough, my dad muttered. Except Mark didn't. For 20 minutes, he pounded on the door, alternating between furious shouting and desperate pleas. I could hear him through the walls, begging me to just talk to him, to listen, to let him explain. I wasn't falling for it. When he finally realized I wasn't coming outside, the anger returned. You think you can just throw me away? He screamed. After everything I've done for you? I let out a bitter laugh from the other side of the door. Done for me? He had used me, Lied to me, bet on me like a goddamn stock market investment. And now that his plan had failed, he was unraveling. Then his voice changed, lower, dangerous. "You'll regret this," he muttered. I stiffened. Mark had never been violent, never raised a hand, never even hinted at aggression. But now, stripped of everything, his true self was showing. My father's voice was cold. "You need to leave." Mark whipped around, coming face to face with him. "You think this is over?" he spat. "I'll find a way around this." "You can't. Just cut me off like I'm nothing." My father tilted his head. "That's exactly what I can do." And I did. Mark's nostrils flared, his hands balling into fists. "You're making a mistake." My father didn't even blink. "No, Mark, you did." Then he nodded to the security team standing at the end of the driveway. Mark barely had time to register what was happening before two men in suits approached him, calm but firm. "Sir, you need to leave the property." Mark glanced between them, then back at me, eyes wild. "This isn't over," he hissed, but it was. The security team escorted him off the property, and just like that, he was gone. Leah let out a slow whistle. Well, that was dramatic. I exhaled, my shoulders sagging as I finally let go of the tension I had been holding. Yeah, it was. But it was also over. Mark had lost. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Mark was gone. His plan had failed. And the weight I'd been carrying, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the shame of almost marrying a fraud, was finally lifting. But I wasn't naive. I knew Mark wouldn't give up so easily. I spent the next few days preparing for whatever he might try next. Leah stayed close, always ready with a sarcastic remark to keep me from spiraling. My parents, especially my father, were relentless in making sure Mark had no way to claw his way back into our lives. By the time Monday rolled around, Mark's termination had fully processed. His email accounts were deactivated. His company credit card was revoked. His personal investments, many of which were leveraged against his assumed marital payout, were frozen. He had nothing. And then, on Tuesday morning, he tried one last time. I was sitting in the garden drinking tea with Leah when my phone buzzed. I didn't even have to check the screen. I knew it was him. Leah raised an eyebrow. "Oh boy, what's Romeo got to say this time?" I sighed, swiping to read the text. "Mark, I just want to talk. Please." I stared at the message for a long moment, my emotions tangled. There was a time when I would have jumped at the chance to talk, to fix things, to believe that he really loved me. That time was gone. I started typing. Me. There's nothing left to say. Seconds later, my phone rang. Leah snatched it off the table before I could react. "Hey, dumbass," she greeted him cheerfully. I nearly choked on my tea. "What? Who is this?" Mark sounded rattled. "Oh, just the person making sure my sister never makes the mistake of speaking to you again," she said breezily. "Now, let's keep this short. You lost, you got caught, you're done. Move on." Mark's voice dropped. "Put my name on the phone." Leah smirked at me. "Oh, I could, but she's busy thriving without you. Bye-bye." She hung up and tossed the phone back onto the table. That felt so good. I burst out laughing. Mark didn't call again. I'd like to say I never heard about him after that, but life isn't a fairy tale. A few months later, rumors started circulating. Mark had tried to land another high-paying job but quickly discovered that burning bridges with a powerful family doesn't leave you many options. He bounced between lower-paying positions, but his lifestyle had always been way above his means. The debt he had accumulated under the assumption that he'd marry rich? It crushed him. Leah heard from a mutual acquaintance that he had to sell his car, downgrade his apartment, and was struggling to keep up with payments. I won't lie, it was satisfying. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because he had earned every bit of his downfall. He had spent years scheming, calculating, treating me like a business opportunity. And in the end, the only thing he had gambled away was himself. And me? I was doing better than ever. 6 months later, I walked into my father's office for one of our quarterly shareholder meetings, feeling lighter than I had in years. My father greeted me with a nod, looking proud. "How are you feeling?" he asked. I smiled. "Like I finally got my life back." He nodded approvingly. "Good. And Mark?" I shrugged. "Irrelevant," he smirked. "That's my girl, the Meeting went smoothly, and afterward, Leah met me for dinner. We clinked glasses, celebrating 6 months of freedom. I still can't believe you almost married that guy, she mused. I laughed. Oh, trust me, neither can I. She took a sip of her wine. So? Any thoughts about dating again? I rolled my eyes. Too soon. She sighed dramatically. Ugh, fine. But when you're ready, let's aim for someone not trying to rob. You blind, okay? I grinned. Deal. A year later, I ran into Mark. I was at a charity gala, mingling with business associates, when I spotted him across the room. He looked different. The confident, smooth-talking man I had once loved was gone. His suit was ill-fitting, his hair slightly unkempt, his face thinner, and the moment he saw me, I watched the blood drain from his face. For a brief moment, I wondered what he would do. Would he approach me? Try to charm his way back in? But no, he just lowered his gaze and turned away. I smiled to myself and carried on with my evening. Because Mark was nothing but a lesson now. Final thoughts. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be standing here, stronger, happier, free, I wouldn't have believed you. I had convinced myself that love meant trust, and trust meant never doubting the person you were with. But the truth is, real love doesn't need blind trust. Real love is built on mutual respect, honesty, and partnership. Mark never loved me. He loved what he thought he could take from me. But in the end, he lost everything. And I walked away without a single scratch. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought, or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.